He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is The Alex Marlow Show.
Welcome to The Marlow Show. I'm Alex Marlow. Thank you for joining me today. Absolutely piping hot news day and busy news weekend. I just got back from the Student Action Summit for Turning Point USA in Tampa, Florida. It was an arduous journey, but I took Master Marlow with me. He was there, so if any of you stopped by and said hi, thank you for doing that. I even got Master Marlow on his name tag. I should maybe hold that up. It's a cool souvenir, but the first time I had him travel with me, it was fun. It was a blast. It was a great conference. Charlie does an amazing job staying at the center of attention, and it was interesting because there's a lot of babies out there online who disagreed with something someone said at the event and then want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I like when our movement has a lot of robust disagreement and debate. And you guys know me, I'm a pro-Israel guy, I'm a Zionist, but a lot of people are, I think, very easily, offended by certain viewpoints. And we can challenge our viewpoints, we can push back, we can find arguments. And I just think the cream rises to the top in the end, and the most credible voices end up being the most powerful long term. So I'm up for any debate that's happening, but a lot of the conversation was sort of Jeffrey Epstein focused. And I continue to stand by my take as being, even though it's simple, I never dwelled on it on the show. I always had my expectations incredibly low that we were going to get much information out of the alleged Epstein files. It just seemed like there was so much evidence that wasn't really quite evidence. It was most people got their hopes up over things that certain people had said one time many years ago without a lot of substance to back it up. And the government it's just not going to be enough to get a lot out of the government. But a lot of things are just going to be not things that can get unsealed. Anything involving child pornography is going to get hard to unseal that. There's a lot of victims that you got to protect of child sex trafficking. There's a lot of mostly innocent people who went down to Jeffrey Epstein's island at one point because thinking they were getting a free vacation with rich and famous people, and then doesn't necessarily mean that they engage in the worst behaviors that were documented. And those people would have their lives ruined if they're put out in some sort of a list. Not to mention, who knows if there's even a list, because a lot of whether or not there is a list is that has certainly been hyped by certain people, but I don't know what that is, and I don't know how long the list is. It could be one name long for all we know. So there was just too much that made me think that we're not going to really get answers to this, and a lot of things are going to remain sealed. And it's just going to frustrate and disappoint people. But I'll tell you where I'm deeply sympathetic, and I've talked about this on the show, to the people who have just had enough of this, is that we were told that the Trump administration was going to come in, was going to be more transparent, was going to give us answers. Donald Trump himself rarely, if ever, talked about Epstein. And it's one of these things where maybe once, I don't remember it. It was certainly not a campaign focal point, but I think a lot of people surrounding him, in particular Pam Bondi, gave, I think, fuel to the fire and gave hope that we would be getting a lot of transparency, which we never got. I pulled this clip of Bondi. This was in March of this year on Sean Hannity's show on Fox News, talking about the Epstein stuff. And this is the type of thing that really gets people's hopes up. Check this out.
We all did. And the FBI handed over a couple hundred pages of documents. But, Sean, I gave them a deadline of Friday at 8 a.m. to get us everything. And a source had told me where the documents were being kept, Southern District of New York, shock. So we got them all by, hopefully all of them, Friday at 8 a.m., thousands of pages of documents. I have the FBI going through them, and Cash is also, now that we have Cash here, it's a game changer, of course, and Cash is going to, Director Patel is going to get us a detailed report as to why the FBI withheld all of those documents.
Okay, I want to be clear, because I think people got frustrated because
Okay, so thousands of pages of documents. We just got them. It's March. We're excited. We want to know why they've been withheld to this point, suggesting that they were withheld and they will not be withheld forever.
Frustrated because they were expecting more. You were expecting more, and you didn't find out less than 24 hours before the release. You got a whistleblower that confirmed that there were way more documents that they were supposed to turn over, and then you found out just before that.
Well, sure. And you're looking at these documents going, these aren't all the Epstein files. You know, there were flight logs, there were names and victims' names. And we're going, where's the rest of the stuff? And that's what the FBI had turned over to us. And so a source said, whoa, all this evidence is sitting in the Southern District of New York. Yep. So based on that, I gave them the deadline, Friday at 8, a truckload of evidence arrived. It's now in the possession of the FBI. Cash is going to get me and himself, really, a detailed report as to why all these documents and evidence had been withheld. And, you know, we're going to go through it as fast as we can, but go through it very cautiously to protect.
So let me say this. I'm not accusing Pam Bondi of doing some sort of a cover-up. I'm not doing that. I don't know if there's anything she can do. I really don't. And I don't purport to be an expert. I'm not saying that she can't do stuff. I'm not purporting to be an expert in terms of how these disclosures work and the sort of legal loopholes and the fact that there's no way to run administration just dumping a bunch of names out because the media demands it of innocent or probably innocent people whose lives are immediately going to get ruined. They're going to get targeted for all sorts of doxing and harassment and maybe physical violence if their names are remotely associated with Epstein. Think about what's going on with Trump. You got Musk out there acting like Trump's a pedophile. Donald Trump, there's zero evidence of that. And the thought that Joe Biden's administration would have known that and covered it up is, of course, implausible. And the thought that Donald Trump, of all people, would have been involved in something like this, given his history, his background, and the scrutiny he's been under, that it would just be coming out now is impossible, and yet is being used today online that I'm watching to target Trump. So I'm not saying she's doing anything in terms of the cover-up that is clearly happening. I'm not saying her hands are tied, but I will tell you this messaging is absolutely horrific because this is hype. She's hype. She's Don Kinging. She is Elon Musking. She's P.T. Barnuming the Epstein files. Like, she's acting like there's a big trove of stuff and we're going to get it. And she's out there and she looks sharp and she sounds good and she's saying it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And months later, and we got nothing. And that is a no-no. It's a communication total faux pas. And I'll tell you that as a communications person who got thrust into the heat of the moment, the heart of the storm, eye of the storm, whatever it is, right away, early in my career, when I'm editor-in-chief of a super powerful newsroom in my 20s, I've got a fair bit of experience just from working with Andrew and working with Bannon and stuff. But, you know, I've done things in the past where I've hyped stuff and then maybe things didn't quite turn out as well as they've been hyped. And you have to dodge that forever. Whenever you do that is a huge risk, because if you don't pay that debt to the public, when you say we got something big, even if you come close, they will still say, should have been bigger, should have been bigger. That's what's going to happen. And that's all that's happening here. This is one example of interview after interview after interview feeding this thing. And so that's why it was just a huge topic of conversation and sort of unnecessarily so in a lot of ways. My hopes are the dust settles, but when there's more questions that are answered, there are more questions than answers. If there's no press conferences taking direct questions from the press, if there's no podcast tour, the podcast tour in the campaign, there's no podcast tour now where people who are in the weeds in these issues can't get their questions answered. They can't get reasonable explanations. Why can't they just come out there and say, look, here's the problem. Most people in the files are innocent and it's going to ruin their lives. You bring them out. There's a lot of child pornography. There's a lot of victims who inevitably would be named with any massive disclosure. And we are investigating, pursuing as much as we possibly can, high profile arrests of anyone who could have done any improprieties. And when we have hard and fast information to report to you, we'll do that. If they had that as their messaging, I think there wouldn't be total satisfaction, but there could be tolerance. But that wasn't the messaging. The messaging is, here are some binders. This is going to be great. We're all going to get to the bottom of these things. And that's a problem. And what's unfortunately happening is a lot of people are seeing their version of the worst case scenario coming true. Trump has been blackmailed. Trump has been co-opted. And then you've got this is actually Mossad. This is actually Israel who's doing this. And you can do this tenuous connection where there were suggestions that Ghislaine Maxwell, who was Epstein's, pimp, was convicted of sex trafficking of children, that her father was Mossad, which I don't know that's true, but that's the rumor. And if that's the case, then maybe there's some sort of a connection. You're giving the conspiracy theorists everything they need, and you're giving nothing. So whatever they come out with something, it's not falsifiable. It's not falsifiable what they're saying, meaning you cannot prove that what they're saying is wrong. And thus they can say it pretty freely because they're not really given evidence to prove they're wrong. And so that's where it's sort of an unforced error by the messaging here. But they kind of continue. And I'm really appreciative of Dan Bongino. But if these reports are true, that he came out and said, you either got to fire Bondi or me, Trump has no choice but to stick with Bondi because Trump is the alpha. And that's why I can't believe Dan would do this because he's a clever guy. And I don't know if it just seems like the way it was translated to the media, this would have been a very ham-fisted tactic if this is really what Bongino did. But if he said flat out, you got to fire Pam Bondi or I'm leaving, then Trump can't back Dan Bongino over Pam Bondi. He can't do that. She is his chosen cabinet secretary, and he cannot send a signal to whoever's next that you can basically threaten me and I will roll over. Trump will never go along with that. So that's why I can't even believe that's what's happening. But that is the reports. They're repeated over and over again in the media. But so I was the least surprised of any person on the planet when Trump came out and he said he backed Pam Bondi. All those media reports put Trump in a corner where, of course, Trump was going to back her in the end because of that. Because you can't out alpha Trump. It is just a no-go. Trump is a negotiator, but he will always be the 800-pound gorilla in the room. There can't be two gorillas. So I don't know if that's really what Dan did, but if it was, of course it wasn't going to work. And it's a shame in a way that overwhelmed a lot of the conversation at the event, but it was also okay too, because I like a good debate. It's fun when there's nuance. It's fun where there's an interest level. And things where it isn't all kumbaya and agreement. And this is one where there are mistakes made on all sides. And I'm interested in it. I'm just very interested in it. And it is one where the debate about the debate is almost as compelling as the Epstein stuff himself, because he's not alive. Most of his bad deeds were done almost 20 years ago. I don't know what influence he's got within our government right now, if any, but it is the fact that there's these questions that people are determined not to answer. It just does pique the curiosity, and we'll see how we deal with it as a movement. Because remember, we've got a very tenuous hold on our majority, given the nature of the Senate and the House, and we can't lose members of our coalition. This is what I've been repeating, and I will continue to repeat it, is that I'm sensitive to even people who had even if I didn't have my hopes up about getting much out of the Epstein files, even if it wasn't my personal issue, my personal obsession, I'm empathetic and sympathetic to the people who are online who this is literally their number one issue. And this is what drew people from maybe sort of a fringe, apolitical place in their life, or even a liberal Democrat place in their life, and bring them to our coalition. They're disappointed, and it's a shame that that's the case. And I think Trump's moves are basically just to fight through it. You just got to plow through it. I don't really see much else that's going to happen. I don't see any big release or disclosure coming forward. I think it's just mostly riding out the news cycle, which is a shame because he really is on fire. I mean, he's doing so much good. All right, we know that good coffee is kind of easy to find. There's a lot of good coffee out there, but great coffee, that's a different story. And when I was introduced to Crockett Coffee, I knew this was something special. This is roasted to perfection in small batches on purpose by experts who love the taste of great coffee and are conscientious about how it's made and who's making it. It's roasted in our nation's heartland and it's delivered fresh to your home. When you enjoy Crockett Coffee, you're also supporting an anti-communist, pro-American brand of coffee founded by our friends Clay Travis and Buck Sexton, who are good broadcasters and are apparently dang good at making a cup of coffee as well. The perfect type of thing to sip at a mountain campfire like a Western settler, or in your office while you're doing a podcast. It is just really high quality stuff. You guys know I'm a coffee snob, married to an Italian. I like to hit that dark roast. They also sent me some mild roast, which was delicious. They got a light roast. They got a decaf. They got a mushroom organic blend. That's the new hotness. They got K-Cups. Lots of different options for you. And part of your support goes to Tunnel to Towers Foundation, which is a great way to give back and remind people that Crockett Coffee, people there, they pledge to never forget. Easy. Go online, crockettcoffee.com. Crockett like it as in Davy Crockett. crockettcoffee.com. Use my first name, Alex. You get 20% off your first order. That's crockettcoffee.com. Use my name, Alex, as the promo code for 20% off. Good people and a dang good cup of coffee. You guys know I would not endorse it if it wasn't quite delightful. And the Democrats are still so weak. We did a poll at Breitbart today. 60% of Democrats still believe Trump colluded with Russia to rig the 2016 election. This is even as Trump continues to be tough on Russia. And I mentioned all the things he did with regards to Nord Stream 2, with proactively selling arms to Ukraine, his first administration, to sanctioning Russia in the first administration, to taking out those Wagner troops in Syria in the first administration. He's always been tough on Russia, tougher than Obama was by a mile. And it's the tougher than Biden was, I think, in terms of policy, not in terms of rhetoric, obviously. And still, the Russia collusion hoax lives on. And in the meantime, you've got the just continuing great economic data. I just can't get over this tariff information that we got, that we have deflationary. We've had deflation since tariffs. We were told tariffs to be inflationary. They've actually been deflationary with a lot of the stuff. I'm looking at charts that were highlighted by the Zero Hedge blog, which I like. Electronics prices are down 2.66%. Personal care products down 0.5%. It's the books are down. Flowers, computers, sporting goods, so many things are actually we're seeing deflation. And it's just one of these things where all of the hand-wringing about the tariff is just so inaccurate and so misleading. We should be celebrating this stuff. We had a budget surplus. The story of last week was that we had a budget surplus because of the tariffs, when we're being told, even by conservatives, we're exploding the debt, we're exploding the deficit. No, we are, because of our tariffs, we actually have a chance to recoup any additional spending that we need to do while we start getting things in order as we transition from the left-wing socialist Biden agenda to the more populist conservative Trump agenda. So much good news, and it's just not going to overwhelm the Epstein conversation because the infighting is just so appealing to everyone. So that was a lot of the conversation. I tried to bring it back to really the fight of our time, which is, are we going to go to the Zohran Mamdani, Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris version of Democrat socialist leadership, or are we going to go to the MAGA alligator Alcatraz version of conservatism? That was the crux of my speech, my main stage speech at the Turning Point event. I will play that. It'll probably be tomorrow's podcast. We'll probably do that as tomorrow's show. And I also interviewed Charlie Kirk and Jack Posobiec and some others. I'll probably cobble that into a show for you guys tomorrow, so you could hear my full remarks. But I tried to make it about some of the positive stuff and the threat of the left, which continues to be what animates me every day. But there was a lot of that, the stress and tension of the Epstein stuff, which does seem somewhat unnecessary. So unfortunate that that's the case. Former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett said that the Epstein never worked for the Mossad. So I don't know what to read into that. I feel like that's what he would say either way. But now we're back and forth on that. And every time we get another piece of info like this, inflames the news cycle and is somewhat distracting. But again, it's summer. We got time. We can work it out. And I refuse to be totally stressed out about this. And people are telling me to be stressed out from all sides. People are telling me to be stressed out that we're not doing enough on Epstein, that we are doing too much on Epstein, that we should not be blaming the Jews. Of course, you shouldn't blame the Jews. You guys know where I'm at on that. But there's a lot of people stressed out over this, and that's not to be dismissed. So it was a lot of the conversation, but overall positive event. And I like that the ideas are flying, and I give Charlie a lot of credit for this, Charlie Kirk. And I talked about this on his podcast today with him, that being a debate society is great. That's what drew me to the conservative movement over the left. The left is more authoritarian, more censorious. We on the right, we want to be that huge tent with a capital Y, where you can work through these issues and we can work through them together as a group. And I'm not afraid to do that. I'm very confident that our ideas on the sort of populist, nationalist, America first, but also pro-Israel Zionist side that we represent at Breitbart, I think we're going to win long-term, medium-term. But I'm not offended if, Tucker Carlson is wondering why the economy does seem to favor certain billionaires and normal people can't get a job. Can't get a house with one job. This is a legitimate problem, particularly for younger people, that if you don't inherit well, it is virtually impossible to get a house off of one job. You have to have a job that is stratospheric in income and save at a level that just people are just not accustomed to saving, given the price of modern life, the cost of living, the cost of groceries, the cost of basic entertainment. and having a lifestyle is just not realistic. You're going to save money to be able to afford a house in a major city or a major suburb. And so that means that only your options are moving, which I don't love that, because I think family is one of the greatest hacks to saving money. I will tell you that an ever-present grandparent saves you tens of thousands of dollars a year on childcare. It's just one of those things. If you have grandparents in the picture, so moving away, well, I can't afford a house in my suburb, so I will go to, somewhere in a different part of the world that maybe I'm unfamiliar with. And then you have no connection, you have no roots, you have no family. That poses its own problems, and it shouldn't be necessary. It would be very nice if the American dream, where you have one job between a two-parent household, was enough to get you into a house by your early mid-30s. That would be nice. It's just not realistic for most people, and that's a problem. And the left is going to message on that the government will save you, like Mamdani. We're going to have more government housing. That's, of course, not going to work. So what is our alternative message? Now, I didn't see anyone suggesting that message. Like, what do we do? Like, how do we message? But I'm not offended that, Tucker's out there raising that problem. Like, it doesn't bother me that he's doing that, because I think it could be a problem down the road, because a lot of us wonder how some people get so rich. And while a lot of people working hard in meaningful jobs that are necessary for communities don't have a path to owning anything. And that's not great. It's not great unless they inherit. So given the longevity, it's going to be very weird. It's going to be a weird moment. And I don't like the word weird, but I feel like it applies here. We're going to have something called the Great Wealth Transfer, where the baby boomers die off and they have lots of wealth, a lot of it that they've saved or in real estate, and they're going to transfer that to their children. A lot of them will be grown adult children in their middle age. And it's going to be the Great Wealth Transfer. It's going to be one of the most transformative economic moments in human history. And it's going to be very strange when people who have never owned a house are going to own a house for the first time at their age of 50. And it's going to be given the taxes on selling it. They get taken to the cleaners by the government if they do that. And then so if it's going to pose all of these economic issues. And it'll be very awkward when that happens for people. And I think it's going to clarify a lot of stuff. And I think we're on the verge of this, 10 years away from this thing really happening. And we got to do more on this with Carney. But you could raise that stuff. It's just not, I'm not going to be offended by it. I do think there's an underlying, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. There is an undercurrent of eventually all roads lead back to the Jews some way or another. And it's off-putting. That's there. I know Charlie doesn't personally feel this way, and I don't think most of the actual speakers feel that way. But there is that thing. I'm keeping an eye on it. I'm refusing to get convinced that it's overwhelming the movement, but I could eat those words down the road. But I'm optimistic that people are playing around with new ideas and challenging ideas. But, Jew hatred stuff is an old idea. That's not a new idea. And I just find a lot of the spokespeople in the anti-Jew right just to be very self-aggrandizing and trying to promote themselves and not actually providing substantial arguments that will resonate with people. So I think if we continue to see the type of things like what we saw with Iran, where clearly Israel softened the target and America was able to carry out a devastating attack that makes all sides look good. If we continue to do that, and if we can continue to remind people of the horrors that Hamas has done during October the 7th with withholding aid from their own citizens in order to get power over them, if we continue to do that and remind people that they are jihadists and they are sponsors of terrorism and use terrorism as one of their primary means of maintaining power, I think we're going to win. I really do. And I just refuse to be anything short of optimistic at this point when you see how much the Democrats are struggling and how much we're getting done. So I think Trump's cool, though. And that's great because all roads lead back to Trump in actuality. And how is Trump behaving? I think he's behaving pretty well. And as I've been saying, I said this in my speech, you'll hear it tomorrow when I play it. I think Trump's been quite predictable. I think people think of him as an agent of chaos. I don't think that's true. I think Trump is an agent of peace. I think Trump, what he is trying to do is, I think he is trying to stabilize the world. And I think that those are the moves that he's making are things that bring us to great stability. I elaborate on this in the speech, so I'll save some of that. But I do think this ties in to the news today that Trump is warning Russia, you got to make peace with Ukraine within 50 days, or Trump is going to have monster tariffs on you. He's not happy with Russia. And I think that this is consistent. This isn't new. This isn't a surprise. I think Trump wanted that war to wind down. I think he thought he could do it. And I think he's disappointed it's not happening. Check this out.
As you know, we've spent $350 billion approximately on this war with Russia and Ukraine, and would like to see it end. It wasn't my war, it was Biden's war. It's not my war. I'm trying to get you out of it. And we want to see it end. And I'm disappointed in President Putin because I thought we would have had a deal 2 months ago, but it doesn't seem to get there. So based on that, we're going to be doing secondary tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. It's very simple. And they'll be at 100%. And that's the way it is. That can be more simple. It's just the way it is. I hope we don't have to do it. But
it's so clear. Exactly. I didn't want this fight. It's distracting me, distracting my agenda. I don't want to talk about it anymore. And I was under the impression that both sides be rational and reasonable and we could broker something, and we're not doing it. And I'm sick of it. So I'm making a move. It's vintage Trump. It's predictable. This is the playbook. This is the MAGA doctrine. This is what he does. He's got tools he uses. He does the surprise strikes, the devastating, quick, unpredictable strike. He does tariffs and secondary tariffs. This is his playbook. It is, and it's great. I love it. I'm for it. It's just, look, he continues to make the moves that I think are the best moves. He elaborated more. He had an event at the White House with Mark Rutte today, or Rudy. I don't know. I should look it up, right, Misty? I should try to figure out how to pronounce it because I keep saying it. But here we go. Here's some more.
any questions, please? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. What was the tipping point for you in making this decision? Was it a conversation with President Putin? Was it a piece of intelligence? And why are you giving 50 more days?
I think I think it's a very short period of time. I think, don't forget, I've just really been involved in this for not very long. And it wasn't initial focus. This is a Biden war. This is a Democrat war, not a Republican or Trump war. This is a war that would have never happened. It shouldn't have happened. A lot of people being killed.
That's right. Shouldn't happen. Biden's war, Biden's fault. I will use this to segue into what is the biggest news of the day this morning, which is that, or I guess it was late last night, New York Times put out a piece that Biden did not individually approve the names of many pardoned via the auto pen. I think that this is so important because it shows a couple things are going on. First of all, Congressman Comer is moving. I'm sure we'll get him on the show to talk about what's going on, but he's taking depositions. He's brought me around the philosophy these need to be in private, closed door, because you get it, just the public hearings just get overwhelmed with grandstanding and all of the goofballs on both sides. We have our own goofballs, and pretty much everyone on the left is a goofball at this point, who are grandstanding, politicking. They get so much time, and the substantial questions are not efficient. So that's why I do the closed door stuff. He's given me the impression that he is moving quickly behind the scenes to try to bring people in, get them deposed, get them to testify about what really happened in the Biden White House. And I think that is great. But what's interesting is that he did not individually approve. First of all, we're going to get clarity now from courts whether or not that makes them legitimate. If they're not, I think that is really just mind-blowing bombshell information. And the other thing is he did personally sign the pardon for Hunter. So he was capable of signing but wouldn't. So what is that about? This is way worse for Joe Biden if he had only signed Hunter than if he had signed a series or none of them. The fact that he only signed his sons shows the suggestion that maybe he was concerned that this one cannot get nullified. My work in Breaking Biden, when I researched this, I'm 100% convinced that Joe Biden really is the family in his own mind. He's a family man who protects his family. He protects all the Bidens. Joe Biden sees himself in that light. And he sees Hunter as his right hand in that regard, as messed up as Hunter is. He 100% believes it, that Hunter's the smartest guy he knows. I doubt that not at all, that Joe Biden said that. So Joe Biden, as I predicted years ago, was always going to pardon Hunter. They called Marlow shot from way back in the day. In retrospect, it looks kind of obvious, but it was a called shot. I said he was going to pardon him for sure. And he signed it himself. Why did he sign only the Hunter pardon? That's the question I want answered. Because if he only signed that one for why, it was just convenient that day, or because he wanted to make sure that he wasn't sure it was legal, the other pardons, when he wasn't signing them, he was delegating that because he was too busy sleeping on the beach. So this is a line of inquiry that we could make some real progress here in terms of unwinding some of the lawlessness that took place within that administration. So much more on that in the weeks to come with Breaking the Law coming out. I could not be more excited to be back on these types of topics because there's not been justice for President Trump. There's not been justice for the American people. And that's what we're going to try to do. And this seems like a great start. So if Joe Biden not individually approved the names, did individually approve Hunter's, then who was the president? You can't just delegate all this stuff. And we're going to figure this out in the court system. It's going to work its way through. I'm very optimistic. But he's telling the New York Times he orally granted them. Is that legal? We don't know. But we know he didn't personally sign them, but he did sign the Hunter one. That's the big deal, that he signed one. He knew he had to sign the Hunter one to make sure that was a done deal, right? Big thing over the weekend that I will point out is it was the anniversary of the assassination attempt on President Trump in Butler. Historic, God intervened, all that. I give this a more air in my speech. So when I play that tomorrow, you will get some of that content for you. But I do want to share this clip of Trump talking about it because his own words are always the most powerful in these moments.
And I was, people screaming, get down, get down. It was the whole thing was just crazy. And it's hard to believe a year is up. And here we are. And a lot of things have happened since then, including the presidency. So, I have an obligation to do a good job, I feel, because I was really saved. I was really saved by somebody very special. People that are shooters, I'm not so much of a shooter, but people that were shooters say it's almost impossible that was a miss. I mean, it was a hit, but it was a miss. Although I do get that throbbing feeling every once in a while.
Is that right?
Yeah, a little bit. But no, I owe a lot. And I hope the reason I was saved was to save our country. We had a country that was, I don't say dead because it's too strong, but we had a country that was really very close to being finished, in my opinion. And now we have the hottest country in the world. That's why I'm so saddened by this. But it's one of those things, those tragic things that happen. But we had
amazing. And I give in my speech, I guess I'll do this redundant because it's so, when you described this to me, when we were I met him in Mar-a-Lago, we had something on the books with him before he was shot. So we got a pretty quick interview with him right after. And I'll tell you, he was changing before our eyes. I could see he was angry about it. And I could see he was in physical pain over it. And I don't think he liked that he had to be more careful because I think that he does like his freedom and he doesn't like to be told what to do. And the way he described being shot in the head in Butler, Pennsylvania was one of the most riveting experiences. I've never heard a story like that. And he tells amazing stories on all sorts of things, but he was describing the detail of how lucky he was. And we were, and we are, to the point where it's obviously not luck. There's got to be more to it. Some of the specifics about how he had this illegal immigration poster that he was referencing, and it was always on the right side, but that day it was on the left side. And he normally talks about it later in the speech, but for whatever reason, he felt compelled to talk about it earlier in the speech that day. And the nature of where he turned his head, that if you do look at just the geometry of the skull, that there was only, a tenth of a second spot while he was turning his head, maybe less, where it would have been in a position where the bullet would have whizzed by parallel. Because if you think about it, if you turn the head, you could hit it from the front or the back, depending on, it would have been in line of the bullet, depending on where he was turning. So the thing that really blew my mind when he described it was he also said that how when the nature of it clipping his ear at the specific way that it did was like a warning to him that he's being shot at. And if it had missed him completely, then the shooter might have gotten another shot unencumbered. So isn't that unbelievable? If you consider that if he hadn't been clipped, he might not have dropped to the ground as quick as he did. And I think the shooter got off like 8 shots or something. So the shooter would have got him with one of the next ones, for sure, if he had missed. But the fact that he clipped him specifically meant that he survived. And then Trump had the most unbelievably dark and hilarious line of all is he said to me, if that bullet would have hit me, my head would have exploded like a watermelon. And then think of it. Think of the propaganda. Think of all of our enemies. Oh, the propaganda they do with can you picture that? My head exploding like a watermelon? And he's kind of making fun of the situation. The darkest thing ever. It would have been a world-changing event. It would have deprived our country of all this. We probably would have had Kamala Harris as president right now to deal with all the things that we're doing, the big, beautiful bill, the Iran nuclear strike, the holding people accountable with tariffs, Trump getting called daddy, all this stuff that we're witnessing. The list goes on and on about all the good that we're accomplishing right now, the ICE raids. All of this wouldn't have happened if that bull had just been a fraction of an inch closer to skull. Just amazing. Amazing. God intervened clearly. I talk about it a little bit more in my speech, as I mentioned, and we'll get some of that going tomorrow. But it is a huge opportunity now for us to continue to run up the score. We got to keep doing that. And world leaders thanking God for saving Trump. 6,500 comments at Breitbart News on that story for us. And or we could have more of the same and more of the Biden stuff. So that is, I think, the biggest stuff that's going on right now in the news. I will take some time. We got some more tariff stuff. We got more economy stuff. I want to get going. There's some other good news that's out there that one-off stories we'll return to later in the week. Nigel Farage has a Doge unit in the UK that's finding hundreds of thousands spent on fast food, Netflix for migrants. So, I mean, we're inspiring a global movement. And I just think that's so important that people are making America first an international thing. When I talk to people really on the cutting edge, this is one of the things that they're really exciting about is we're going to export MAGA. It's not just going to be here. It's going to be all over the world. And I like that. Maybe I just grew up in a certain way at a certain time, but America first doesn't mean America only. And I am really up for seeing what can happen if we can extend MAGA beyond to what it already is right now. So I think that's a really, really essential thing to talk about. All right. So one other thing that I will bring up, because it is a huge story, and I did do something I've not done in a long time, which is I went to the big blockbuster movie that everyone was talking about on opening weekend. I went to Superman. I did it. And I want to give you some thoughts on it because I talked about so much on the show and also on Breitbart Confidential. John Nolte is a great review of this at Breitbart News for Fight Club members. So if you're not a Fight Club member, then I don't know why you should be. And it would be great for you to be a Fight Club member. But it's the politics were mixed on it. I'll start with the politics and I'll talk about the movie as we go. But I will say that I haven't got a chance to do a big movie review in a while, so it's exciting to do that. But there's a light spoiler here. It's like it won't affect you. I mean, the plot's not great anyway. So but one of the big reveals, and fast forward 30 seconds if you can't handle any spoilers. But this is basically you should be able to handle this. We learned that Superman's parents did not have good intentions, his birth parents, when sending him to Earth. Superman wasn't even aware of this. And actually, his Kansas-based white Americana parents did such an amazing job raising him, and that's why Superman's a great guy. So just right there, it's pro-Americana, it's pro-adoption, it's pro-nuclear family, it's pro-white middle American, and all of that comes through in the movie. So so Nolte's conclusion was, with that being a central and obvious blatant theme of the movie, that's why James Gunn was out there saying this is woke and it's about immigration and it's a political movie. Nolte thinks he was inoculating himself because he didn't want people to perceive it as which is what it obviously is. It is a sort of pro-white, pro-American movie. It just is by nature. And I don't think it would have really devastated the storyline for James Gunn not to make those choices. So I'm not trying to give him tons of credit for it, but I do think that clearly, for the sake of the story, that was a conscientious decision. They were aware of it and they wanted to mitigate against it. And I think that's partially why they did such a bad job in the press and the run up, because you cannot get away from those themes. But it's a Superman's parents, wanting him to basically conquer Earth, and Superman instead became just a savior of humanity and a great guy. But there's other stuff that is imperfect. He's a bleeding heart, which is sort of one note, and he's sort of a boy. They make him more of a boy than a man. And the romance between him and Lois Lane, you're really rooting for it, but Lois Lane is clearly a woman. And in lots of different ways. I will avoid specifics because I don't want to get taken out of context, but she's very womanly in a lot of her behaviors and her looks and her actions. And she's with Superman, who's sort of a dumb, childish Superman. And that's a little incongruous, doesn't totally work for me, but there's some good romantic moments. There's no real dilemma. There's no tough choices in the whole movie, so there's no suspense at all from a plot perspective. Lex Luthor is a tech bro, so he's an Elon Musk or maybe a Peter Thiel type character. And so clearly that's very anti-big tech, big corporatist, which is fine with me. I'm fine with that as a plot point, but again, not super original. Feels like that's an obvious one. He's also sort of a gamer, which I was surprised by. He commands this room, Lex Luthor does, of all these people on screens commanding various high-tech weaponry against Superman. And that is just very weird to me. He's calling out what to do like he's playing a video game, and I found that to be very odd and distracting. But an engineer is a bad guy. Literally one of the bad guys called the Engineer. So clearly a very ham-fisted anti-Musk, anti-Peter Thiel type character as the main guy, which I can live with that. The American government comes off as sort of incompetent and oblivious, which again, I can live with that too. The defense contractors are portrayed very badly, which I'm fine with it. That's again, it's sort of MAGA. So we don't like the defense contractors. They come off as terrible in this. So the politics is a lot for us, believe it or not. So there's a lot of stuff that's pro us, pro MAGA, and that's why Nolte's review of it does flag that, and it does explain a lot of the acting like it's not a MAGA movie in some of the PR stuff. A couple of other political items in it that I will say that are not for us. It does appear that there's an allegory to Israel-Palestinian conflict where Israel is portrayed as the bad guy. And that's maybe I'm stretching a little bit. So maybe you guys can correct me, email me at aloha@alexmarlow.com if you didn't see that. But there was a conflict halfway around the world that Superman meddled in. And it does look a lot like Israel versus the Palestinians, and Israel's 100% in the wrong in the way it's portrayed in the movie. So that seemed to be in there. He yearns for the establishment media, for newspapers. The worst scene in the movie is Lois Lane is flying a UFO while she's dictating copy to her newspaper in a virtuous way. Completely absurd to the point where you're taken out of whatever plot there is, which there isn't much. So but it's this yearning for newspapers being just great reporters and breaking big stories is very lame to me. But the establishment TV media gets big stories wrong, falsely villainizing Superman, and that I dug. That happens all the time. And Lex Luthor had Jake Tapper on in his office at one point. That was kind of cool. So it's very mixed politically, but overall, you got it. It nets out for us, and nets out as a more pro-conservative movie than anti, even though they did really try to lean into the immigration narrative that Superman's an immigrant and we demonize immigrants. But it doesn't really work because he's a white guy who assimilated and speaks English and is highly productive. So it's just that attack on the right it's thin. It doesn't really work. So I think they just tried to spook you guys off from seeing it. I will say it's not a full recommend just because it's not a great movie. I was entertained. Gun to my head, I'll give it a thumbs up. But it is one of these films where there's not really a plot, and there's also too much plot, so you're getting lost at certain moments. But also you feel like the plot is super thin and implausible. So that happens quite a bit, and so they're strained in certain stuff, and it's very chaotic, and it feels a lot like a Guardians of the Galaxy type movie. There's a lot of jokes, not all of them hit, but overall I had a decent time. I'll tell you one thing for your parents out there. It's kind of a kids movie, but they have a lot of bad words, a lot of S words and AH words. And I took my 6-year-old, and that was not great because he's aware of those words at this point, but I really don't want him to have, and I felt bad about that for his sake, because otherwise it is sort of for young kids, but they interject these use of swear words for no reason. And I don't get that at all, why they made that choice. It just seemed really, they should just gone for the PG if they could, and not go for the PG-13 type deal, because I felt a little dumb for having done that, even though he can handle it. He's smart. He listens to me, but it's not for every young kid, even though it could have been easily without that decision being made. So that's it. It's a comic book movie. It's kind of fun. It's kind of for us. So that explains the marketing. So I will add, in terms of box office, it's doing a little better than anticipated. The domestic box office, 122 million opening, but underwhelming with 95 million overseas. It's bombing in China, even though James Gunn, the director, has been pandering to China. And he said it's like coming home when he went to China. The comic book movies, they would love for them to be in China, but China is very hot and cold on those types of movies in the past. But I thought I would fill you in because there was so much to talk about. I had the opportunity to see it. I saw it, and I don't regret seeing it. It was fun enough. It was a fun enough afternoon with my little guy, and we had a good time. So there you go. But I don't like that the journos are heroes. Journos are rarely heroes these days. All right. I think that'll be today's show. There's a ton more to do, but I don't like cramming these things in too much because I like when you guys download every one. That's my goal. I hope you tell 10,000 friends and family members about all the things that I'm doing here at The Marlow Show. And I hope you subscribe, leave comments if you haven't yet already, and noticed a nice little uptick on YouTube, which is a slow and steady climb, but we're trying to do that. So we're out there. If you're not getting the visuals, you are missing out on some of the hard work we put in. And that's where we're at for today. All right. Yeah, that's it. Thanks to Misty. Thanks to all of you in the audience. I'll talk to you tomorrow.